Good morning, everyone. Just give you a little, one more minute or so, and we'll get started with our second session here. Just a few housekeeping, as you can see on the screen. As we speak, you can load your Q&A in using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And we'll have some opportunity to answer questions after the presentations. We'll go ahead and get started. My name is Sabrina Chandler. I'm the Refuge Supervisor and Refuge Manager of the Upper Mississippi River National Wildlife and Fish Refuge, and I supervise refuges on the Upper Mississippi River from the Ohio confluence up to the Chippewa River confluence near Wabasha, Minnesota. I'm really happy to come here today and in my role as a co-chair of the Environment, Recreation, and Agriculture Committee of the Mississippi River Parkway Commission. And we want to talk about, of course, the All-American Road and the All-American significance, but the natural significance of what the All-American Road brings visitors to. And to start off with that, we have Mr. Aaron Yetter. Aaron is a waterfowl ecologist with the Illinois Natural History Survey, located at the Forbes Biological Station and the Belrose Waterfowl Research Center in Havana, Illinois. It's part of the University of Illinois. And Aaron is known as the flying biologist. He spends a lot of time in an airplane counting waterfowl using our natural areas along the Mississippi River. And he's going to talk to us today about waterfowl abundance and distribution and the resources that we have available to folks that are visiting along the Great River Road, but also those critters that use the Flyway, the Mississippi Flyway, and connecting them from the breeding grounds to their wintering locations. So I'll hand it over to Aaron and we'll hear his presentation.
Okay, let me get everything rolling here. All right, is the screen up? My presentation up?
Yep, we can see your screen and your presentation, Aaron. Thanks.
All right, here we go. So thanks, Sabrina, for the introduction. This is my office at the Forbes Biological Station on the shores of Chautauqua National Wildlife Refuge. It's under Sabrina's realm as Upper Miss Refuge Manager. So this is where I hail from. I hope my talk isn't too Illinois-centric today, but we'll proceed. So this is our most recent picture of our current staff. It fluctuates all the time, but we have 6 full-time staff, 5 current graduate students, and 2 technicians now. So there we are at the North American Duck Symposium a couple of years ago. And I wish I would have done a little bit more homework about this presentation, but I really gathered the significance of how the Great River Road overlapped the Mississippi Flyway here in blue. And this is in a waterfowl ecology, this is how we separate the different waterfowl stocks or corridors that waterfowl use across North America. And the Mississippi Flyway is where we hail from here in my office here down here in Illinois. Some historical significance. Belrose in 1948 counted 1.5 million mallards in the Illinois River Valley on November 22nd. And he also counted 670,000 lesser scaup or bluebills on Pool 19 at Keokuk, Iowa, or between Keokuk and Burlington. So huge numbers of birds and national significance. The Illinois River Valley has historically housed large numbers of mallards in the Mississippi Flyway. In fact, from 1955 to 1996, Illinois mallards represented 21% of the birds counted on the midwinter inventory in the Mississippi Flyway. This number has dwindled a little bit in recent years in mallards, and we're currently down about 10% of the birds, mallards anyway, that come through the Mississippi Flyway spend at least one day in the Illinois River Valley. So pretty significant numbers of birds coming through. And here it's just another graphic describing the breeding areas and the migration corridor and the wintering areas of the Mississippi Flyway. So we've been flying these waterfowl surveys that I do. My primary job in the fall and spring is to count waterfowl along these rivers. We've been counting them since 1948, and in spring since 1955. It's a weekly flight, and it is an index. It's just a guess on the number of birds that I see along the rivers. And over the past 72 years, we've only had 4 observers that have done these flights. And here's the locations of the flights. We start at Hennepin, Illinois, and fly just down to almost St. Louis, and then up the Mississippi to just below the Quad Cities. There's a few less areas in fall than spring, but in general, that's the flight path. And over the 72 years, as I said, 4 observers. Frank Belrose, world-renowned waterfowl ecologist, flew the surveys for 23 years. Ted Crumpton followed for 19. Michelle Horth followed for 14. And I've been in the airplane since fall of 2004 and 2005, currently flying. So everybody always asks me, how do you know, or how do you guess how many birds are there? There's approximately 40,000 birds in this picture. You can see a lot of the white in there are pintails, northern pintails, and a lot of mallards. And then the darker birds you can see are gadwall and green-winged teal all mixed in the mass. This is usually, the birds usually aren't this dense. This is an ice concentration. It's early December and everything was frozen, so the birds are really packed in. But we use cues of habitat types basically on how to identify the birds. So, you wouldn't normally find a canvasback duck in this moist soil unit. They may use it, but most of the time it's going to be the dabbling ducks. And you might also use different behaviors. So one might ask how I know that these are American white pelicans instead of snow geese, and that's that snow geese hate the airplane along with white-fronted geese, and they tend to fly half-mile out from me getting there. So, and pelicans could care less whether there are big birds flying over top of them. So they just sit. So these are American white pelicans hanging out on a mud flat. Here's a bunch of Canada geese and mallards sitting on ice. And one thing you have to learn to do as an aerial observer is to, most of the time you see birds and you're identifying them from their belly side, whereas I'm identifying them from their backside. So you learn the different colors of the birds and mallards here standing on ice and the Canada geese. And then to estimate the numbers, basically you count 10 and you make 10 100, and then you make 100 1,000, and then you block them out there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,000 snow geese in that picture. And from time to time, I take those pictures and I put them on my computer and an ArcGIS, and I obtain the area of the flock, and then I obtain an area and do simple algebra and say that it's all relative to the overall flock size, as long as density is consistent across there. So there's about 7,300, 7,350 snow geese in that picture. All right, so now we're going to do a couple little quizzes. Remember, I fly low altitude, usually less than 200 feet off the deck, and it's going pretty fast at 160 miles an hour. So you have to make a decision pretty quick on what kind of birds and what species are there. So here's a little picture. Okay, and you can guess in your mind how many that might have been, and that was about 152 swans. Obviously, this is a computer simulation that we use to help train biologists on how to count birds fast, but we can move into another one here. It's a little harder. And there's some pintails, shoveler, and green-winged teal on a wetland, and that's about 300 of them. using Emiquon National Wildlife or Emiquon Preserve in central Illinois. 454 Canada geese, 1, 2, 3, 4, 50. 7,000 mallards using an ice hole on the Illinois River at Chillicothe. Or this picture down by the confluence of the Illinois and Mississippi River down by Grafton. When we flew over this picture, it was in December and everything was frozen and I couldn't even see space between the birds. They were so packed tight. And I turned to my crop duster and I said, or turned to my pilot who is a crop duster and said, how many acres of ducks is that? And he said 2 to 3. So I assumed that 1 duck per square foot is about 43,560 square feet per acre. So 2 to 3 acres of ducks is about 100,000 pintails and mallards using that. Complete guess, but it's the best I could come up with at the time. So what do we use this information for? Illinois DNR and others use the information to model migration chronology. If you're wanting to harvest blue-winged teal, you want to set the season around a time when the blue-winged teal are going to be there. And if you're looking at pintails or camelbacks, you want to set your seasons around the dates when those birds are actually coming through. And so this is the 10-year average, most recent 10-year average of ducks coming through the central Mississippi. Mallards over here on the right, just because there are so many more mallards than the other individual species. So that's one way we use it. We also use it to monitor trends over 72 years. So in the blue here is the Illinois River. The red is the central Mississippi River. You can see the big crash in the Illinois River due to pollution of sewage and everything coming out of industrial pollution coming out of Chicago. And the river really crashed in the late 1950s, early 1960s, and then it's kind of just been slivering along since then. And the Mississippi River total duck numbers over time as well, and with a little uptick here in the most recent years. Here's a more graphic example of what happened to lesser scaup, and I apologize, this is to fall 2020 and not 2021, but you can see the Illinois River crash in the 1950s due to pollution, and the scaup then hopped over to pool 19 of the Mississippi River, and they did well over on the Mississippi for a while, but then eventually in the late 1980s, they crashed there as well. And so we're holding on to numbers. It's still a major stopover area on the Mississippi River for North American lesser scaup, but not near the numbers that we had back in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. And then here's just relevance to the Mississippi River. This is total ducks, and all these slides they're measured in use days, and the use day is just a measure of 1 duck on a wetland, or 100 ducks on a wetland for 10 days would be 1,000 use days. And you can see the upper Mississippi, so above Keokuk in the blue, and here in the red, everything from Keokuk to Grafton. And you see this major upswing since 1993. And admittedly, I picked the lowest point in the graph to show this graphic, but since 1993, we're increasing ducks at about 700,000, close to 700,000 use days per year. So large numbers of birds coming back. And so I wanted to just show a picture of why that's happening. And here's a picture of some recent renovations on Clarence Cannon National Wildlife Refuge, which is part of the Upper Miss Refuge system. Recent renovations, spent millions of dollars here, I'm sure, and phenomenal habitat now. If you could zoom in on these two pools, there might be 30 or 40,000 ringneck ducks, mallards, and pintails sitting in there. The other thing that Missouri is doing in their floodplain along the Mississippi River is they're pumping in a lot of their WRP funding for private landowners to restore wetlands. And so there's lots of habitat by private landowners with subsidies from the WRP program that are creating lush habitats for birds along the lower Mississippi. So now moving in just a little bit into hunting traditions, and this is Illinois centric, but it applies throughout the flyway. And you see that historically, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, we were market hunting waterfowl and overexploiting them and harvesting them in massive numbers across the flyway. And here, this picture, I just had to point out, I don't know what this guy's got a hat on his head, but something's going on there. And then we marketed those. They would ship those birds from the Illinois and Mississippi rivers to the big cities and have them on the menus of the famous restaurants in those big cities. So you can see here are some of the species that were shipped. And then back in the late 1800s and early 1900s, we were baiting, putting out thousands or hundreds and thousands of bushels of corn in duck holes, trying to attract birds. And you can see all the corn cobs here that are left out in this guy's duck hole to attract birds for harvest. And then they also had game farm birds or a captive flocks that they took out, live decoys that were used to lure in the birds, the mallards, to come into their harvest for the duck hunters. And they even had Judas birds, which was a live duck that they would hold in the blind. And when birds would start flying around at this, or mallards would start coming by in flocks, that the hunters would throw up these Judas birds, and they would go fly up to the flock and actually lead them in, lead the wild birds in to harvest. And then as things started getting, regulations started getting more restrictive, they had to start coming, hunters had to come up with new ways to harvest birds. And so the decoy carvers across the country, but specifically the Illinois River Valley and Charles Purdue and Edmund Purdue carved some their wooden decoys, and those have become folklore over the years. And in fact, in 2007, Charlie Purdue's sleeper hen brought $252,500 at auction, and this shorebird brought $214,000. So huge historical significance and value in those old decoys. P.S. Olt from Pekin, Illinois, also started making duck calls along the river. And now many call makers up and down all of our rivers and streams are providing duck calls across the country. And in the late 1960s, early 1970s, Belrose started finding birds dying from lead poisoning. And the birds ingest the lead shot used by hunters in shot shells and thinking they were seeds, and just a couple of pellets will kill them. So that led to lots of regulations coming. Just a couple here. The first Illinois bag limit of 50 ducks. Wood ducks were protected. They were almost extirpated in the early 1900s, so they were protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. And then the Duck Stamp Act and live decoys here were removed and prohibited in the 30s. And then non-toxic shock regulations finally came into effect nationwide in 1991 due to Belrose's and others' efforts to get to ban lead from hunting waterfowl. Now a little bit into harvest. You can see here the Mississippi Flyway is the dominant flyway for waterfowl harvest across North America, and we shoot about 41% of the ducks harvested in the Mississippi Flyway. An amazing, almost 50% of the lesser scaup harvested in North America occurs in the Mississippi Flyway. So huge importance for lesser scaup. And just a little bit on harvest in Illinois, and this is a busy slide, I realize, but mallards are our #1 bird in the harvest. And then wood ducks, green-winged teal, and gadwall rank 2, 3, and 4, and that varies by any given year. Just showing the different species composition. And then how yearly variation occurs here. Almost 82,000 mallards were shot in 2018 compared to 192. This just reflects 2018. We had a freeze on Veterans Day, and most of the birds pushed out, and so that's why the harvest was reduced in that year. And so here, where do they come from? Where do our birds come from? Frederick Lincoln in the early 1920s from the federal government came in to start the first official banding program, and that was done on the Illinois River at Chandlerville. And he spent many years banding ducks at the Sanganoy area in the old Sanganoy Gun Club. And here's just a representation of 18,000 mallard or 18,000 ducks that were harvested in Illinois and where they were banding from. And so you can get an idea of not only the Mississippi Flyway here, but just a general idea of where our breeding grounds are. And then so a little better maybe graphical of where our birds come from. There's been several studies, some back in the 60s and 70s and others in the 1990s, and even some in the early 2010s, where that they've determined where our birds come from. But the major players here are in the colored areas, and the big emphasis here is on zone 14. This is the Great Lakes states, and many of our mallards now, almost 30% of the mallards we harvest in the Great Lakes states are homegrown birds, are breeding right there in those states. And just some of the mallard bandings over the years. I forget how many bandings this is, but this is all the harvest locations or recovery locations of mallards banded in Illinois from that period, starting with Fred Lincoln in the 1920s. This is another graphic showing lesser scaup banding. There's 2 banding programs now, which we control both of them. One on Pool 19 of the Mississippi River in gold, and then we band ducks on the Illinois River here, and those are in blue. We've done that for the last 10 years, and somewhere around 20,000 scaup have been banded, and you can see the distribution of those birds across the country, showing the breeding grounds up here to the wintering grounds down on the Gulf Coast. And this is a graphic showing the distribution of other birds that we banded, or all the birds we banned over the last 5 years. And it starts September 1st. You'll see the birds starting to be recovered up here, and it moves south over time. So those are Canada geese mainly in the north, and then lesser scaup will start to show up here in the blue, and now down here in Louisiana on the wintering grounds. And just a graphic display of the number of birds that are harvested that we banded over the last 5 years. This shows the other way. This is the banding location of greater white-fronted geese that have been harvested in Illinois. So these are all the harvest locations, and these up here are the banding locations. So you can see the breeding grounds for the greater white-fronted goose or specklebelly. And then a little bit on new technology. Several years ago, we had a graduate student, Ben O'Neill, a PhD student that used radar, Doppler radar, the same that models weather, to monitor duck migrations. And you can see here all of the birds leaving these areas, Pool 7 and 8 up here in Wisconsin and Minnesota, Pool 13 here in Illinois, the Illinois River Valley, down here at Grafton and the Wabash River region. Notice that all those birds are leaving at approximately a half hour after sunset on those particular days, and they're all going in a south easterly direction. So that was some of Ben's PhD work. And as in recent times, we've gotten better with technology, and so now we're using cellular transmitters basically on different birds. So here's a little bit of some wood ducks that we're putting cellular transmitters, solar paneled transmitters on the backs of wood ducks at the Forbes station. We've done that for the last 3 years. And here are the migration paths of some of those birds that they've left. And you can note here that on average, those birds flew 262 miles at a clip. The longest one being 534 miles that left up here in Kilburn, Illinois, all the way down to Texarkana, Texas, and that flight took approximately 12 hours for the bird to complete. So when they go in large groups. Here's just a little video of some of those wood ducks and how they bebopped around, and then their migrations. Taking off. So when they take off, they go in a pretty large group clip at a time. And then this particular bird is that we had a transmitter on it for 2 consecutive years, the same transmitter, and there it is up in Havana, and it finally takes off and goes to Arkansas, and then it goes down and winters in Louisiana. And then it hangs out down there until about mid-April, when it returns to the Illinois Valley, and it nests about 30 miles south of where we caught her at Emaquan. And then it had a failed nest, and then it went up to, you can't see it maybe, but it said went up to St. Cloud, Minnesota to molt. And it spent the last summer up there in St. Cloud, Minnesota. And then in October, it took off, and it went all the way down to just outside of San Antonio, Texas. So pretty neat migration ecology from these birds. And then this is just a graphic of some of the Tennessee Mallard project. And you can see the birds down there this winter. This is the second year of that project. And then at the 1st of March, when things thawed out after that hard freeze in February, the birds took off. And most of those birds were through here by the 10th of March. So just how the little bit of a graphic on how the birds move around. And I think I'm probably out of time, so I'm going to stop there. I have a few more slides, but I just wanted to point out that Winston Churchill once said, the farther back you can look is the farther forward you are likely to see. And I think that's the really good example of, if we know where we were, what we used to have, and what we want to have in the future, we can make that happen with habitat management and restoration projects in the future. So thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. If you want to stop sharing your screen, we'll kind of recap here. I think it's great to see the resources that we have here on the Mississippi River, and the availability of those resources to be enjoyed by the public, either through wildlife observation or hunting and other recreational opportunities. Lots of movements along the river in the Flyway. It makes me think of visitors traveling the Great River Road as well. So lots of folks know the Mississippi River because of the Mississippi Flyway and how it contributes in some of those larger maps that Aaron showed. These birds are moving all over the country and all over the hemisphere, and they come to the Mississippi River, and we have the ability to enjoy them. So next up, I want to introduce Hallie Rasmussen. Hallie is the Visitor Services Manager of the Upper Mississippi River National Wildlife and Fish Refuge. Hallie's going to talk to us about her title of her presentation, Finding Refuge Along the Great River Road, primarily focused on National Wildlife Refuge opportunities and how visitors along the Great River Road can enjoy those, but also what National Wildlife Refuges are, as well as applying to other conservation areas and conservation lands along the river. And again, don't forget to put your questions into the Q&A, and we'll have that session after Hallie's presentation. Hallie?
Thank you, Sabrina. Hello, everyone out there in the virtual world. It's been over a year, and it's still hard for me to do the virtual thing because I'm such a people person. But hello, let me get my presentation up and share my screen with everyone. I practiced this, so it should work. Also, I will say that I'm going to make sure that you are awake. So hang on, wait. So I'm going to maybe ask some questions to the group. And if you want to answer them, you can put your answer in the chat thing, which I need to figure out how I can see that on the screen. Yeah. Hang on, everybody. 1 second here. All right. Okay. So my name is Hallie Rasmussen. I am the Visitor Services Manager for the Upper Mississippi River National Wildlife and Fish Refuge. It's a long title. So before I jump into what our refuge is, I kind of want to give you a little background for this audience on who I work for right here. And kind of talk about the refuge system a little bit. So go ahead and do that first. Okay, this lovely graphic here. So we are an agency, federal agency under the Department of the Interior, which also is, we're kind of the, sister agency to these other agencies here. So I'm sure most of you have heard of the National Park Service. First question. Name a national park or wildlife refuge that you've visited, and put it in the chat. Okay, so the National Park Service manages national parks. The Bureau of Land Management, they are kind of more of, they are a multi-use type of land management strategy. And the Fish and Wildlife Service, we are really a conservation agency, obviously open to the public, but not as focused on public use as maybe like the Park Service. And then over here, the Lone Forest Service is managed under the USDA, and they're obviously focused on, forest products. So just to give you a little background on who I work for, here's our mission statement: working with others, Great River Road, to conserve, protect, and enhance fish, wildlife, and plants and their habitats for the continuing benefit of the American people. I want to be able to see the chat box.
I can help you out, Hallie. There's
Sabrina,
Yosemite, Yellowstone, Chaco Culture, Mississippi National River Recreation Area, Big Lake National Wildlife Refuge in Manila, Arkansas, Sherburne
Ooh.
National Wildlife Refuge. So we got some good participation and a very good variety of locations that folks have visited. So that's awesome.
That is awesome. That's so great. Meeting control. I don't know. Okay. Well, you're going to have to keep helping me because I got to figure out how to get back to where I can see the chat. Cool. All right. Carrying on. Because this could take a really long time if I continue to dawdle. Oh, my lights go off in here because we conserve energy. Okay. So also not to be confused with our state DNR partners. So that's why I like to throw this one in there, because I'm pretty sure my parents thought I worked for the Department of Natural Resources for the first 10 years of my career. But we are a federal agency, and the state obviously is confined within regulating the conservation laws within the state. So that's the difference. Okay, this map, this is going to be another question. So get ready. And Aaron and Sabrina, you can't answer this. Okay, so this is a map of all of the national wildlife refuges in the United States. There's probably more now. This map might be kind of old, but you can see that there's maybe kind of a pattern to where these refuges are located. Why do you think they're located in those areas? Sabrina, if you could read any answer to me, I would appreciate it.
We're getting a lot of folks saying wetlands and flyways, water, rivers.
Bam. Nailed it. That's it. The flyways, really. Water, all of those things. Everyone is correct. So look at this cool animation I added to this slide. Flyway, flyway, Mississippi Flyway, which we just learned about, and Atlantic. So yeah, you can see that they are set up. So this is my analogy that I love to use for national wildlife refuges, and it's very appropriate for this group because it's about road tripping. Okay, how many of you have been on a road trip? I've been on lots of road trips. I'm sure most of you have too. What are some things that you need to have a successful road trip? You need fuel for your car. You're not going to get very far if you can't gas up. Okay. Restaurants, maybe, or snacks, something to eat. You're going to need a place to use the restroom. Maybe you're going on a really long road trip and you need to sleep. So maybe like a hotel or campground or whatever. Now, if you think about that and you think about birds when they're migrating, it's like they're on a road trip. They also need a place to rest and to feed and to fuel up, like our little canvas back there. It's not real. But that's why we have these national wildlife refuges. These birds need a place to stop and fuel and rest and feed. And without this habitat that's set aside, as we've seen, you will see a decline because they're not going to make it very far on their migration if they don't have these places to rest and feed. Okay, question number 2 up for this slide. Why do you think there's so many national wildlife refuges in North Dakota. And go. I'll give you 1 minute. Sabrina, any answers?
I think you might have stumped them, Hallie. Oh, wait.
Oh, wait.
Buried potholes and breeding areas, oil companies, wetlands, fewer people, lakes and potholes.
Yep.
Took them a little bit, but I think they're getting it.
Yes, correct. Yes, it is the prairie pothole area of the United States, and something like, and Aaron could correct me here, but it's like 50% of the nation's waterfowl nest in North Dakota. So lots of places for them that we have established refuges so that they can nest and make more duck babies, which would be ducklings. That's science. Okay, carrying on. So that's the National Wildlife Refuge System. Now, let's talk about the Upper Miss National Wildlife Refuge. We are located in 4 states. We're 261 miles long. And this number is probably increased to, I bet we're probably closer to 250,000 acres now, because we're still acquiring land all the time, which is awesome. Way to go, Sabrina. Another little slide to show you. This is kind of fun. So since we're such a long National Wildlife Refuge, 260 miles, we are separated into districts. So, and these are, the districts are the pools of the river. So here, this is where I work out of, is the La Crosse district. We have an office in Winona, La Crosse, McGregor, and Savannah. And we have visitor centers in La Crosse, which I'm in right now, but we're not open yet, but I'm in the office. And then there's one in the Savannah district too. So we have multiple offices that we manage this National Wildlife Refuge out of, because it'd be really hard for somebody way up here to be able to manage way down here. So it works pretty good. Okay. Now let me brag about the wildlife, because it's awesome. We have almost 300 migratory bird species. That's an insane amount of birds. If you have a life list, come here. Close to half the nation's waterfowl use our refuge. This number may even be higher. I think it's probably closer to 400 nesting pairs of bald eagles now. Like, it's growing every year. So canvasback, one of my favorite ducks. We have a lot. Okay, so here's another interactive question for the group. Why do you think we have such a large population of canvasbacks that like to use the river? Particularly, I'm not moving enough, particularly Lake Onalaska area. Any guesses?
Food source and habitat, backwaters.
Yep. Yeah, you nailed it. You nailed it. The food, I mean, their favorite food is located there. We call it aquatic vegetation. They're not weeds. So I like to clarify with that. But yes, if, like, for example, I'll just use me. I love pizza. So yeah, I'm probably going to go to the pizza restaurant versus the taco shack. Canvasbacks, their favorite food is here. They're going to come here. So pretty cool, because we are like, come on guys, and eat and rest. So that's awesome. We also get, I think this number might even be higher. We get like 30%, I think, of the tundra swans, which is super cool. I'm going to make a connection to the Great River Road on that one here in a second. Tons of fish, obviously, because it's a river. And mammals and mussels, big one. So cool wildlife. Guys, we get like almost 4 million visitors per year. That's right up there with Yellowstone, which I think somebody probably mentioned that they had been there. So it's a lot. We get a lot of visitation on the river, which is, I mean, and we've seen like an insane increase in the last year because of COVID and people wanting to get outside and do stuff. So I would say we've probably seen like a 20% increase across the board. A lot of fishing, a lot more fishing, anglers. But you know, across the board, huge increase. Awesome. Okay, so here we go. This is the connection. Wildlife refuge plus Great River Road equals recreation. Because let me show you a little map, another map. So you can clearly see here the Great River Road Scenic Byway. It goes along, basically borders the National Wildlife Refuge. So when people are on the Great River Road, they're also looking at a National Wildlife Refuge. So visitors that are coming to the refuge or to the river are going to be on that road, but vice versa, we get people experiencing the National Wildlife Refuge that might not have otherwise if they hadn't decided to take the Great River Road. So that's us working together with partners to conserve you saw the mission statement. So some fun things to do real quick. Visitor center here out on the Bryce Prairie, which is on Alaska area. Beautiful, really, really cool place. Let me show you a little peek in the inside. We've got these awesome exhibits. This glass floor is super, super funny to see, like toddlers or young kids like try to walk on it because they're really unsure, but it gives you like an underwater viewscape of, or it gives you a viewscape of what things look like underwater in the river. So that's pretty cool. And then lots of cool stuff to do. We've got this really great nature store that our friends group manages for us. And so once we are open and back up and operating, come and visit us. But you can come now and hike on the trails if you want to. We've got great trails, especially in the summer when the prairie is in full bloom. Beautiful place to come. We check out these backpacks for free, full of fun stuff like binoculars and field guides. And what else is in there? Like prompts for kids to do when they're out there. Like, hey, try to find a something in nature that looks like the letter A, you know, stuff like that. It's pretty fun. So, and then you can come and park and take a walk, or if you don't feel like walking and just want to park and check out the river, you can park here and check out the overlook. Also 96 miles of canoe trail, tons of canoeing. I think we have a total of 16 or 17 canoe trails total. So if you like to canoe or kayak, this is your place. Bike trails, the Great River State Bike Trail is managed by the Department of Natural Resources, but goes through and along areas of the National Wildlife Refuge. So really good opportunities there. This was Jamie Bertram. She was a refuge ranger, but she went to the dark side, the Park Service. She works at Oregon Games now. But anyways, I actually like the Park Service, but you know, they're just different. Okay. We have lots of overlooks, which are located on the Great River Road. The Brownsville overlook is a huge popular one because that's where you can see the tundra swans when they kind of are coming in their major numbers. I think this year was really cool. There are probably like 15,000 swans out there this year. And we just had tons and tons of people coming to see them. It was really neat. And then there's one, oh, you know what? I put a little map on here to give you all another map. So here's La Crosse. Here's our Brownsville overlook, which is just south of Brownsville, Minnesota. And then across the river is Shady Maple Wildlife Overlook. And all this, Great River Road. So that. Okay. We also provide environmental education programs, which is one of my favorite things to do. Miss doing that, but we'll be back up and running on that pretty soon, doing some virtual stuff. And we have fun interpretive programs. This cute family, he's holding a little bird. We were doing like a little bird banding station. Fun. Oh my gosh, so funny. And then it's so fun because then the kids can let the bird go and it's pretty neat. Yeah, I think here we're talking about how we do firefighting and stuff for wildland firefighting. Also super fun. So just some other fun things that we do on this National Wildlife Refuge. Special events. This is Brownsville Overlook right here on the Great River Road. We have a waterfowl observation day in November, which is cool because we have Friends of the Upper Miss and the Friends of Pool 7 and 8, and I think maybe just those two friends group. Anyways, it's a great partnership, and lots of people come and they serve like hot chocolate. It's awesome. Aldo Leopold Day is another one that we have in March. This is a bunch of people out on a hike where these college students are talking about their reading excerpts from Aldo Leopold, which is so cool. So anyways, that is the National Wildlife Refuge. That's the river. And I encourage everyone to come and visit in some form, go fishing or whatever your preference is. So thank you.
Thanks, Hallie. If you want to stop sharing your screen, we'll have kind of our panel discussion here. We'll bring Aaron back if he's still available, and we'll have a conversation about how this relates to the Great River Road and the visitation, the resources that are provided, and how fortunate we are to have these opportunities along the river. So start putting your Q&A in if you have questions for either Aaron or Hallie or myself. But first, I want to kind of tie it up here just a little bit and share some facts for you. We've been talking a lot about tourism and economies and how things contribute. So I wanted to kind of continue on a little bit of that trend from our earlier session and share some numbers with you. We have it broken down into the upper Mississippi River, which is above the Ohio confluence, and the lower Mississippi River, which is the Ohio confluence down to the Delta. In the upper Mississippi River, tourism, manufacturing, agriculture, recreation, all of those things combined provide about a 345 billion with a B annual return on the economies, and that's over 1 million jobs that are supported. Over 95% of those numbers are just manufacturing, tourism, and agriculture. And then the tourism and outdoor recreation itself, and again, for the upper Miss, supports about 420,000 jobs. Waterfowl hunters, like the heritage that Aaron talked about, and visitors to refuges, as well as other locations, contribute significantly to that. And I'll give you some numbers on that in just a second. On the lower Mississippi River, not quite as much because the river's more contained in the lower river because of the open river with the levees and things like that, but $152 billion of economic return and 585,000 jobs. The tourism, agriculture, and recreation aspect of that is about 18% of that total, and around 300,000 jobs. And then manufacturing essentially takes up the rest of that. As far as the Upper Miss Refuge, and we focus on that one because it is the largest refuge on the Mississippi River, and has the largest impact from visitation. It is the used to be the top visited refuge in the country. Oregon Coastal Refuge Complex is trying to steal that title away from us lately, but we're still neck and neck, really close in the top 2 there in visitation. Most of that visitation is hunters and fishermen, but we are seeing, like Hallie said, a significant increase in non-consumptive recreational users, the canoers and the wildlife observers. But we usually have about 4 million visits, as Hallie said, and that has returned about 125 million with an M in economic output to those local communities. So we're pretty proud of what we offer through the refuge system, but also in the other conservation areas, and then just in general from the abundant natural resources and recreational opportunities along the Mississippi River. So lots of national significance. People travel here from all over the world. People know the Mississippi River beyond our banks. Very regularly see international travelers who come just to touch the river, and the input of that into the economy is pretty significant. But also the hunters who buy the duck stamps, and Aaron touched on that, help contribute to conservation of the natural resources, as well as the land acquisition opportunities for protecting these areas. So really significant to the national economy, but also accepting the fact that like Hallie said, a number of these individuals are just traveling along the Great River Road because they know its national significance, and then they realize the national significance of the Flyway and those areas. But then the other way around as well, they come to the refuge and then they realize that there's this whole other opportunity along the Great River Road. So the symbiotic relationship between the two is tremendous, and we're happy to discuss that. So looks like we've got some questions coming in. Maybe Aaron, you can answer this one. Gina would like to know how closely the ducks are following the river, or if it's a broader swath, just generally aligning with the river.
So yeah, we used to think, and maybe they did back in the day, but we used to think that they came and they flew down the different corridors, the different river corridors and stream corridors. But as you saw from the graphic of Ben O'Neill's work, when they take off from a specific spot, like on Alaska up on Pool 7, that they don't necessarily fly straight down the Mississippi River. They're flying across country and going somewhere. Doppler radar loses them after so far because of the curvature of the earth, but they don't necessarily follow the corridors until you get down to down to Tennessee and south, where they hit that big Mississippi River floodplain, and they start following more closely down there.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Kind of related to that, there's another question in here from Terry that says, you mentioned new tech as Doppler radar and cellular transmitters. What's the newest tech that's coming to the Mississippi Flyway in the near future?
Cellular transmitters are pretty new. They're less than 10 years old, maybe less than 5 years old since I've started using them. Modus tags and point tags are things that modus tags use. A bird has to fly past a tower, and there's several towers across the country, so that your bird will, whenever it flies past a tower, it'll pick it up, and then you can tap into that system that everybody else uses, kind of like cell towers almost. That's a big one. And pinpoint tags, they collect data, they collect waypoints every however many times you want them to, and then they upload. Ours currently, we have them on SCOP and some rails, and they'll upload every 3 or 4 days, or you can program them to however you want them to upload, but it's all battery life is what, unfortunately, the battery weighs the most out of the transmitter, and so you're trying to minimize weight on a bird, and so battery is critical.
science is cool, and we're learning all kind of new ways to track the science of especially waterfowl and animal movement. So really, really cool aspects of that. Thanks, Aaron. There's another question here. Hallie mentioned that our facilities are still closed to the public due to the pandemic. There's a question from Sherry about our plan and calendar for opening refuge sites like Bryce Prairie and others. I'll take that one. We are working towards resuming our operations. We're going through processes because we are a federal administration, working in the executive branch. We get a lot of guidance from DC on how to handle those things. We are going through those plans and trying to evaluate local conditions and finding ways to reopen and help keep our visitors and our staff safe. So we're hoping to be able to do that very soon, but we're still kind of going through the check boxes of trying to meet the expectations of the administration and make sure that we're doing things safely. So hopefully we'll be back open very soon. Hallie and her staff have been doing a lot of things virtually and providing experiences that way. I know yesterday or Monday, you did a virtual presentation for a local school group, Hallie. So we're trying to increase our engagement with folks, even though we are closed. But Hallie, do you have anything to add to any of that? You're muted. Okay.
Hang on. Okay, I found it. I opened a document and it opened on this screen and not that one. And then I couldn't see the Zoom anymore.
Anything to add about reopening, Hallie, or any of the opportunities that we've continued to try to provide virtually?
Well, I guess the thing that I like to tell people, especially because this last year, it's like, what do you do now if you're, teleworking and not? We've been really busy trying to meet the needs of the community still. I mean, we have our managed hunts at Trumpelow, which I manage the public use for at that refuge. So, trying to find creative ways to provide resources to people has been pretty time consuming. Trap tags that we sell and trapping auction at Trumpelow that we had to do through the mail. So we've been keeping busy and we're still trying to provide all of those resources. The building is the visitor center is just one very, very small piece to what we do. And so all the land and water is open and has been. So, even though we're really trying to conserve energy with the lights around here. Even though, this one building is closed, everything else is open for the public. And so managing that and maintaining our infrastructure has been pretty time consuming. So.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Hallie. We've got a question from Roz. She says, I think I saw somewhere that you have information on native pollinator butterfly plants that are in your prairie near your trails and your visitor center on Bryce Prairie. Can you provide some information on educational resources that are currently available?
So we have like a comprehensive plant list and we also have a few wildflower guides that you can we have laminated and that you can take out into the field, and I can send you the PDF of that. We also have a few lesson plans on prairie plants, if that's what you're looking for. So if you want to shoot me an email, I'd be happy to send you those resources, and I can put it in the chat. I'll do it right now.
Thanks, Hallie. There's a question in the chat about how the Upper Miss Refuge compares to other refuges in the U.S. on size and attendance and the number of waterfowl that are attracted, the significance to the rest of the country. The Upper Miss Refuge is the largest refuge in the lower U.S., with the exception of a few out west, but certainly out east. We are one of the largest, closing in on close to 250,000 acres. And we are fortunately situated in the Mississippi Flyway, which Aaron talked about, already host a very large percentage of the waterfowl in the country. So due to just the geographic location and the size, we do have a significantly higher number of waterfowl and swans and geese, to that matter, that use the refuge here. So it is quite a bit bigger. Now, we do have national wildlife refuges that are millions of acres, and even in the lower 48, the Desert National Wildlife Refuge is almost 2 million acres. So we're not near the biggest, but because of the geographic location, we are very fortunate and able to provide the habitat that those critters need. So definitely significant in the country. Also with the visitation, definitely ranks there at the top as well. There's another question in the chat about percentages for visitors doing various activities at the refuges. The majority of our 3-4 million visits are hunting and fishing visits, but we are seeing a significant increase in those non-consumptive users, just general boating or what we call beach use, folks coming on to sandy areas within the refuge. Hallie, anything else to add on that?
I think a large percentage is boating, and I mean in all forms, not just like hunting and fishing as much. I mean, the boating has been crazy. You couldn't even like find a boat landing to park at. So I think it's a lot more non-consumptive people just out boating and enjoying the water.
There's a question here about hosting many people from other countries as well as the US that are focused on seeing eagles and nesting eagles around the Quad Cities. And the question is asking if we ever really focus on those. It mentions awareness of webcams, but really wanting to see the eagles live. And also locals that are very excited about swans now nesting here. The ultimate question is, how can people see these birds without really disturbing their lives? You want to take that one, Hallie? Or
yeah, I mean, I'm not as familiar with the Quad Cities area, but it's probably similar. I'd have to look into that area, but I know like around here, the eagles will, depending on the time of year too. I mean, there's certain times of year that it's better, but we'll have high concentrations of eagles where you can see, 15 to 20 sitting out on the ice from a certain location. So there's opportunities for people to view eagles depending on time of year and location. I know up here we have in La Crosse now, they actually have an eagle overlook that the La Crosse County and a few other partners put together because they tend to gather in that spot when the ice starts to melt and they can fish there. The eagles are fishing, not the people. So there's opportunities for sure for people to see large concentrations of them and be able to see them live. It's pretty hard to see them when you can see them in their nest, but I mean, it's not the ideal location to see live eagles, I would say. Can you tell I have a hard time sitting still?
Sabrina, I'm gonna jump in and say on our experiencemississippi.river.com website, under interactive in our menu, you can go down to webcams, and we do have a couple of webcams from throughout the 10 states that do offer a view, and certainly if there are others and we're able to share them, just let the national office know and we will add those. But right now we do have 5 different webcams, and a couple of them specifically on the river that may offer views.
Yeah, the Bald Eagle Trio, have you heard of them? They're a big deal. They are a big deal. It's two males and a female that have been, okay, no, that's what I was about to say was a lie. They have a new female because the first female died. So the first female was Hope, and it was 2. It's like what do you call that, Sabrina? What's the science word for that? For the 3 living together?
Yeah. that webcam was destroyed with their nest last year, but they've re-nested, and so we don't have the equipment back up on that nest yet, but we do have folks from the ground that are kind of monitoring that. But keying in on the disturbance aspect, I think, you know, what we ask our visitors to do is be respectful of the wildlife and make sure that we're not invading too much into their space. And that's one thing to keep in touch. And webcams are a great way to be able to do that. But certainly seeing these birds live and being able to observe them safely from afar is something that's really exciting. There's a comment in here about ideas and suggestions for ways to leverage the refuge and the All-American Road partnership to add travelers and bring people back. You know, I think this is exactly what we're trying to do, and our involvement in the Mississippi River Parkway Commission, trying to leverage those relationships. As I mentioned before, you know, a lot of the people that come to visit the refuges just saw the sign as they're driving down the Great River Road, or, you know, vice versa. So we're seeing a lot of that relationship building, and we certainly want to increase that partnership as much as we can, recognizing that there's value in each of the different audiences that could definitely overlap. I'm kind of rushing through this just for the sake of time here. Sorry about that. There's another comment about the glass floor exhibit, Hallie, and thoughts on highlighting Great River Road travelers and the hidden work of habitat restoration. Again, you know, trying to focus on the benefits of that, and focusing on the fact that, yeah, you're on a road trip, and yeah, you might just be stopping to use the restroom at the visitor center or the interpretive center, or, you know, whatever, but highlighting the natural benefits of that as well. Hallie or Aaron, do you have anything along those lines where we can focus that habitat restoration and highlight that to what I would consider probably more non-traditional visitors?
Yeah, I mean, we do highlight that actually at our, and I just redid these signs for the Brownsville and Highway 26 overlooks, where we talk about the island restoration that's happening in the habitat that it's providing for the birds, and why you're seeing so many birds here, because we have done this habitat restoration, and here's all these islands that have been reconstructed. So that message is definitely really important. And I think that we are trying to get that out to the public in different ways. So, and we have a big, you know, display about that in the visitor center as well, showing the island restoration over time on these giant maps that are really cool and interactive and fun. So, so I think, you know, I think that message is out there, but certainly something that we definitely want to keep, you know, making sure that we are communicating. I hope that answered it.
Yeah. Aaron, do you have any thoughts on that?
I was just thinking that I don't know if you make available to the public where your different HREP projects or habitat restoration projects are, but you know, there's a multitude of bird watchers come to those projects. I can think of here in Havana at Chautauqua National Wildlife Refuge. Not only do the you know, when they're doing a drawdown to provide duck food for fall and spring migration in July and August and September, the shorebirds flock there, and the birders follow, and then the duck watchers follow. So there's a multitude of people and groups that go, you know, have tours and you know, Audubon groups. Everybody goes to those areas to find those birds and see who can get them the rarest bird or the greatest number of species.
Birders are very competitive people, for sure. They take it very seriously, and my husband's one of them. There's always this contest going on. So yeah, that's a really good point. We do have some of that information available, and we try to highlight that on some of the kiosks. There's a question in here about, Sherry says, your roadside and pull-off kiosks are fabulous and provide interpretation to the traveler for what they're seeing on the refuge and tell them about where they are. are there any plans to increase the presence of these kiosks? Hallie, you want to know?
No. No, and I'm not saying that like
maintenance.
I'm not trying to be negative Nancy on that, but we have, I think at the McGregor district alone, we have like 30 kiosks and we have 3 staff. We don't have a public use person there. We actually don't have a public use person in Winona district, McGregor district, or Trumbull. So, so my big thing is that I want to make sure that we maintain our existing infrastructure as much as we can, which we aren't able to do at this level of staffing and budget that we have. So there, in my opinion, my humble opinion, I don't want to add additional infrastructure until we can maintain what we already have that's existing. So great question. I don't mean to be negative about it, but we have a lot of
But you are improving the existing kiosks that we have, updating the signage and
Yep.
things like that. So we're at least able to maintain that quality and continue to provide fresh information. But like Hallie says, funding and staffing is a limiting factor here. And as we do have the opportunity to fill back some positions and do some other things, we would hope to be able to have those types of opportunities. But again, that could be where we could have some partnership opportunities with the Great River Road and the interpretive centers and providing some of that information and sharing some of our resources for other kiosks as well. So something to keep in mind, Sherry. Our time is running short here, but there's 2 more questions in the Q&A. Well, one is a comment. Lock and Dam 18 is a great place to view eagles. I would agree. A lot of the lock and dams have really good opportunities in the late winter, early spring to view eagles. And then lastly, Terry talks about, Aaron, you mentioned the first duck stamp was issued in Illinois in 1975. And then obviously the National Duck Stamp Program. What proportion or amount of Flyway financial support is generated by the Duck Stamp Program currently, and how are Duck Stamp dollars prioritized for use? Maybe I'll take a big overview stab at that one, Aaron, and then you can fill in the blanks if you have information to add. But I did do a quick search here, and the latest data I have is from 2018. There were almost 1.6 million duck stamps sold, and since 1934, there's been 6 million acres of habitat that was purchased using Migratory Bird Treaty Act duck stamp funding. And then more than 300 national wildlife refuges. There's 567 or so total. More than 300 of those were created or were expanded using duck stamp dollars. And at least one refuge in nearly every state has benefited from duck stamp dollars. So it's a pretty significant program. We encourage anybody, not just duck hunters, to purchase duck stamps because of that significant impact to the resources and our public land. So Aaron, anything else to add on that point?
Yeah, so the federal duck stamp was in the 1930s, I think 1934, and then Illinois came much later in the 70s or whenever that was. But I know in Illinois, I don't know the specific details about money from the stamps, but they use it for habitat infrastructure on the wetlands at various waterfowl areas. And then I know they send a pretty significant chunk to the prairies for habitat purchase and that the like up there. I did have a slide that I didn't get to that not only showed the significance of stamps and PR dollars as our duck hunters are declining across the country at a pretty significant rate. And the federal excise tax, Pittman-Robertson tax imposed on them for sporting arms and ammunition contribute vast amounts of dollars for habitat restoration and salaries and site management, you name it, research. A big portion of our program at the Forbes station is funded by federal aid dollars. So as the number of hunters dwindles, the number of stamps purchased by those hunters dwindles, and the number of guns and ammunition that's purchased by those hunters dwindles. And so it's a never-ending loop that we're going down, we're going to spiral down if we don't change the decline in hunter numbers across the country.
Yeah, very good point, Aaron. I think we are out of time, so I'll just leave you with a couple of parting thoughts. As you're driving down the Great River Road, remember all that it has to offer besides just, you know, the stops along the way. There's all this abundant natural resources. And as you're taking a look at the river, think about all the things that we've talked about here today. When you stop at an overlook and you start trying to count birds, think about how difficult that is and how difficult it is for Aaron to do it from the air at 160 miles an hour. And just really realize the great significance that not only the tourism and the economic impacts, but also, you know, the road trips that the birds are taking and the people are taking, and how fortunate we are to have those resources. So we really appreciate your involvement today, and hopefully you learned something. And if there's anything that we can do to help in the future, please let us know. And I guess, Ann, I'll turn it back over to you.
I'm gonna jump in here and just again thank Sabrina, Aaron, Hallie for your time, your expertise. Wow, so much great information. We're gonna take a 1-minute break here just to kind of stand up, stretch, refresh. Please don't go anywhere. We are going to begin our party, our celebration of the All-American Road in 1 minute. Thank you. Stand by.